We're talking today with Mr. William Vander Wall of Spring Lake, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Vander Wall, can you start by giving us a little bit of your own background? For instance, where were you born?
I was born in Spring Lake in 1922 and can remember the Depression as a young adult. And my parents were very, very poor. But everybody was poor in those days.
What kind of work did your father do?
Made cement blocks in Spring Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And after the war was over, my brother and we continued in the cement block business.
I'm just gonna, okay. I'm going to pause that here. All right, you're talking a little bit about your own family. Now, so did your father then own his own business at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
But it was, that's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Made one block at a time. Today, and in those days, you'd make 300 to 500 block one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we can make 15,000 block, and it's all automatic.
Now, where was he getting his business from? Who would he sell to when he was making the blocks?
Basements.
Mm-hmm.
Very little commercial business during the war.
Mm-hmm.
Or, excuse me, not
Depression,
during the war, but before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't old enough to really understand. I went to Grand Haven High School. My last 2 years, I went to Spring Lake for 10 years, and
Mm-hmm.
then I had to go get my senior year in Grand Haven, and I flunked my senior year in bookkeeping and civics.
Mm-hmm.
I went home in this 1940. I went home and told my father, I'm quitting school. I don't like school. And he tried to discourage me, but I went to work for him making cement blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Then the war came the next year in December with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and man, I tried to get in the Marines the first week of January,
Mm-hmm.
but I had injured my knee roller skating, and I couldn't squat. They wouldn't take me. But by April, it was healed up, and I said goodbye to my parents. My brother was already in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
They took him right away, and I joined the Army in April of 1942.
Okay. Now, before Pearl Harbor had happened, were you paying much attention to what was going on in the world? But there was a war in Europe and all of that?
No, the only alertness that I had that things were right in the world, I remember saying to my father, Dad, it looks like we're going to get into the war with Germany, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it? And I remember the very words he said to me, because I was on top of a truck shoveling gravel off, and he looked up to me and he pointed a finger and he said, son, you wait and see, we're going to be at war with Japan before.
Mm-hmm.
So this was before Pearl Harbor.
So he was probably paying attention to the news as well.
Yes, oh yes.
Because there were certainly tensions going on with Japan that eventually got us
Yes.
there. So we thought of that already. Now, but for the most part, that wasn't your concern so much as just
No,
doing
I
your
was
job.
too young.
Yeah, the rest of
I
it.
had a 36 Ford and a girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in another world.
Right? Okay. So, the war breaks out. You manage to get yourself signed up into the Army in April of 42. Now, then where do they send you? Where do you go for training?
I went down to Camp Forest in Tullahoma, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
infantry, and took 6 weeks of infantry. Excuse me.
Basic training?
6 months.
6 months of training.
of infantry training. I was on a mortar squad, and I was the gunner that would sight in the object I wanted to drop a shell into. And my father, when the basic training was over, my father and mother came down to see me, and when he heard I was on a mortar squad, because he was in the artillery in World War I, he said to me, if I remember correctly, with tears in his eyes, he said, "Son, as soon as you can, and as quick as you can," that almost means the same thing, get a volunteer to get away from that mortar. Well, we listened to our parents.
Okay.
You know,
Well, before we get to follow that track, let's back up a little bit. I want you to tell me a little bit about the actual experience of basic training. First of all, before you went down to Tennessee, had you ever traveled that far before?
no,
And how did they get you down there?
train.
And do you remember about how long that took?
No, I don't. We went from Battle Creek down there, probably a day and a half or 2 days.
All right. So what did you think of the long train trip?
Well, that was kind of exciting because I'd never rode on a train before. And
Yeah.
it was exciting what was going on in my life because I'm from a small town, you know. And the farthest I ever got, I think, away from home was Chicago one time with my parents. You know, it was a hick town.
Yeah. So you're starting to go across the country a little bit. What kind of reception did you get down in Tennessee? I mean, when you got there, what happened?
Well, we got assigned to a division right now. And we took infantry training and marches, and it was hot. But being in the cement block business and working for my dad, I was hardened. My brother and I were both hardened too.
So you were in pretty good shape. You were used to working
I
outdoors.
was in excellent shape because everything was lifted manually then, and we used a shovel to shovel into the mixer to make the cement blocks and bag cement. And today everything's automatic.
Right.
You don't touch nothing. So I had no problem keeping up on the marches I was hardened to it.
Okay, how about the weapons training? Had you done any hunting or anything like that when you were a kid, or
The what?
weapons training, rifles and all that?
Well, we had to be able to tear our M1 down and put it back together blindfolded, and I can still do that today. And I have yet. I was telling somebody the other day I have the scorecard that I kept on the firing range when we went on the first time we went out to fire that M1 rifle, and I did good with it. That was a great rifle.
Okay. Now, were the people who were in camp with you, were they pretty much mostly a group of men all from Michigan, or were they now mixed from all over the place?
I kind of palled up with a kid from Muskegon, which I did not know. His dad owned an ice cream called Brandstrom's Ice Cream in Muskegon, and we clicked. He was married, and I wasn't. He had one child, I think. And, but he went to the Pacific and I went to Europe. So when we come back from there, we come together to see each other and renewed acquaintances, and they came to our wedding, and we've been friends ever since, and his wife just died 6 months ago with Alzheimer's. But he was married in 1940.
All right. Now, you're down there, so you spent about then 6 months in Tennessee going through training. Now, is that basic and then advanced infantry training at that point to get you to at what point do you start being on a mortar squad? When was that?
You know, I gotta retract something.
Mm-hmm.
It was 3 months basic training
Right.
in Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I volunteered to, my dad told me to, they wanted 40, they wanted volunteers to go on this amphibious
Mm-hmm.
deal. And I didn't know what the word meant.
Mm-hmm.
I did, honest. But my dad told me to volunteer. So
All right.
I raised my hand and I'm one of them. And on the train I go to Camp Edwards, Massachusetts after 3 months of infantry.
Okay. Now, what area of Massachusetts was Camp Edwards in? Was it near the coast somewhere, or was it inland?
Chesapeake Bay area,
Oh.
around Hyannisport.
Okay, that's not Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake's down in Maryland, but yeah, the kind of Long Island Sound and all of that. But on the south side of Cape Cod.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of facility was that? What sort of place was it?
It was an army camp, just like barracks and but the training was in boats, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of, describe a little bit the training. What kind of boats were you using and what were you doing?
Well, the Navy supplied the assault boats,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd have to go make mock landings along the coast. I don't know whether it was on the intercoastal waterway or whether it was, I don't remember, but we'd make mock landings 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and the boat would come in for a landing, and we didn't know whether you were stepping off in 2 feet of water or 6 feet of water.
Mm-hmm.
And it was September and October especially, and we didn't know really what we were doing. And
Now, when you would make these mock landings, what were you supposed to do, or what was your unit supposed to be doing when they landed?
we'd carry in a box of sand, simulating ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
If the we never engaged in a mock battle.
Mm-hmm.
It was just to establish the beach
Right.
along the beachhead.
Okay. And so the idea here would be to kind of figure out a little bit, what did the Army think you were going to do? Were you going to basically mark off for everybody else where they were supposed to land? Did you clear obstacles or mines?
Well, okay. In every invasion that I can remember making, there was always lights that we put up on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
One was green, yellow, blue, and red. And these were sections of the beach where the Navy boy who drove the boats was told to go to Red Beach.
Right.
And in our boat, there might have been 10 infantrymen and a signal corps man and a radio man, and they had it well organized. Not from the beginning, but the more invasions we made, the more we were getting good at it. But our job was, if there was mines on the beach, we had to clear them. If there was barbed wire bandoliers stretching the beach, we had to get rid of it so the infantry could get through, and the tanks and the trucks.
Yeah.
And then we would make, in camp, we would make up long rolls of chicken wire and tie burlap to it. And we would carry that in on the assault boats and off the assault boats onto the beach. and lay it across the sand so the trucks and the jeeps and that didn't get stuck. They would,
All right.
and it worked very good.
Okay. Now, so you said, but initially when you're doing this and so forth, did you have anybody who was training you or leading you or whatever who had any practical experience, or were they all kind of learning it as they went?
It was all a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
There was what they called a cadre from, we were the 540th, and I think the cadre come out of the 36th Division.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the men that had taken the training before we did,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't know much more.
But they hadn't used it either. It wasn't as if there were people who had been landing on
Oh,
islands in the
no,
Pacific
no.
already or anything like
You
that.
know, this amphibious is a new thing.
Yeah, it was very new. And in 1942, we were only just beginning to use it at all.
Yeah.
And you guys then are going in fairly early on. So, when did you finish the training in Massachusetts?
After
then?
another 3 months, about 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
2.5 months at the most, and then they wanted 40 men to go with a lieutenant to Baltimore, Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
to clean up the ship that eventually we went overseas on.
Mm-hmm.
It had got rammed.
Mm-hmm.
So we were up there a week or two helping clean up the ship. And when we come back to Newport News or Norfolk,
Mhm.
wherever we embarked from, we stayed right on the ship.
Right. Now, how did you wind up with the group that went down there to work on the ship? Did you volunteer or did someone pick you?
Because he was my lieutenant,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Allowed us to go into Baltimore at night, and it was, you know, I've said this war is hell, but there's a lot of times we had good times,
Mhm.
you know, between the men.
Right.
I was a buck sergeant for over 2 years, 2.5 years, before I became a platoon sergeant, and we knew everything about each other
Mm-hmm.
in that length of time. We knew the names of the girlfriends,
Mm-hmm.
those that got the Dear John letters, and whose father died.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you look, you know, hindsight is 20/20, but it's an experience that you should remember if you can remember it. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
And at that stage, of course, you hadn't even been in combat yet. And so mostly what's
No.
happening is you're learning new things, you're meeting people, you're going places, you're preparing for something important.
Not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part when we come down Chesapeake Bay and come into Newport News, I think it was, or Norfolk.
Mm-hmm.
We stayed right on the ship.
Yep.
40 of us. So I had no shakedown on the ship. Because they took cameras away and everything, but I wound up with my camera,
Mm-hmm.
and I took some of them pictures with a Browning camera.
Right.
And pretty soon, the next day or two, here comes ammunition being dumped into the hull of the ship, and tanks and trucks and jeeps. They were loading to go to combat.
Mm-hmm.
And we must have been in there a couple days, and pretty soon we'd go chugging out of Chesapeake Bay out into the Atlantic Ocean on the 19th of October. And we started across. Patton was on my ship,
Mm-hmm.
or I was on
That Patton's ship.
Patton's ship, and I saw him many times strutting around with his revolvers, but you know, I didn't know Patton from you. And but he was in command of the first invasion, and we fought the Vichy French, you know.
Let's see now. fill in a little bit more about the trip over. You had gone on this ship with 40 men out of your battalion. Did the rest of the battalion come onto that
Oh,
ship?
yes.
All right. And at what?
Two battalions.
Okay. Now, what kind of ship was this that you were sailing on?
It was a troop transport.
Okay.
Because it was the USS Harrison, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
if I remember correctly. Because we had to go down the rope ladders down the side of the ship to get into the assault boat to hit the beach.
Okay.
We had to climb.
Now, but it was sort of a conventional transport. It wasn't like a special invasion ship or assault ship of some specialized kind.
No,
it was more of just a standard one at this time.
They didn't have them yet.
Right. Okay. So about how many men then were being carried on the ship if you've got both battalions there?
Well, we had the 9th Division Infantry.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't.
Okay.
I
So you're
can't-
sailing with part of the 9th Division as well as your
Yes.
own. Okay. So it's a lot, probably several thousand men on the ship.
Oh,
then.
yes.
All right. As well as the various equipment that they loaded on.
Yeah.
All right. Now, were you traveling in convoy when you were crossing the
yes.
ocean? All right. What was the weather like when you were going out there?
It was good going over.
Mm-hmm.
High seas. Of course, the ocean always has high wave. And I remember, I was too young to really realize what I was going through. Here's a battle wagon, New York or Texas behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And what a sight to see, watch that, the front end of that thing go underneath the water.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that it was foul, because I was on the flagship, see, Patton
Right.
was the man, and we had this battle wagon tailing us with a lot of ships out
Right.
in the convoy. But we saw no submarines.
Nope.
There were submarine alerts,
Mm-hmm.
but we weren't involved in that.
Okay. At what point did you find out where you were going?
Probably not till mid-ocean.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us a little booklet, and it said Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll show you a picture of that. Out at our block plant, they gave us, because I made 5 invasions,
Mm-hmm.
they gave us a booklet for every country we were going to invade.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a blue book called North Africa or Africa or French Morocco, whatever it was, but I still have it. I have all 5 of them, and I don't think you could buy them any place. Maybe in an antique store.
Antique store or an eBay. I mean, there's a few around, but they're certainly collector's items by now.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did these books, was it giving you sort of basic information on the place and the customs
Yeah,
and,
the
some
customs
and some
and
words to
the-
use and that kind of thing?
And we read them on board ship.
Mm-hmm.
And how come I saved them, I don't know. You know, I didn't have any. All I had was a backpack,
Mm-hmm.
and I must have kept them in there, but they turned out nice.
Okay. Now, did they tell you much about what your actual mission was going to be, what your assignment was going to be
No.
in the landing?
No.
All right. Now,
we were facing the enemy.
mm-hmm.
The enemy was the Vichy French, because they were German sympathizers, you know. And I didn't know anything about the Vichy French.
Mm-hmm. Now, describe sort of what happens then on the kind of as you're going into the landing, the day before, the night before. What kind of preparations are going on before you go out?
There's no preparation until you get near the land that you're going to invade.
Okay, and then what happens?
Now remember, we're greenhorns.
Right.
And we're getting ready to go over to the side of the ship to get into the assault boats. And the surf was tremendously high. 1 minute that assault boat would be right underneath your feet, and the next time it would be down in the bottom of the wave, and it'd be 25 feet down. A lot of men, when they jumped for it when it was on top of the wave, missed it. I say a lot, I don't know the number. But as I'm going over the side, my first sergeant, Arnold Lestrani, said to me, "Vander Wall, you carry the flag in for the company." I need to carry that flag down that side of that ship like I needed a hole in the head. I grabbed it and I climbed down and waited till that assault boat come up so I could jump into it.
Right.
And I made it. And so it starts to go towards the beach. And I bet I didn't get a block away from the mothership, and I'm seasick.
So had you been seasick on the transport? No, but now you are. Okay.
Well, the surf was, that little was like a duck.
And you were in like one of those little like, LCVPs, the little Higgins boats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About, I don't know, 20, 30 of us.
Yeah.
And we started towards the beach, and they try to go parallel so that more than one boat doesn't hit here and another boat later. They try to
Go in together. Yeah.
go in together. Now remember, there's a red beach, yellow beach, blue beach, and a green beach. And that guy who was driving that, or steering that little assault boat, he's told which beach to go to. Well, we started in, and the French started to shell us with artillery from a high cliff, and in comes a shell between our boat that's parallel to us and our boat, and I'm puking over the side. And I remember it to this day. There was a captain from the 9th Division Signal Corps. He yells at me. He's with his back against that ramp that drops down. And he says, "Soldier, you better get your head down. You're going to get it blowed off." I'm going to quote you verbatim what I told him. "Have you ever been seasick? Well, you know what it's like." I turned to him and I said, "Captain, I could care less." And I meant it. And man, I wanted to die and could. And I don't know how far we were out, probably a good long block or two at the most, but we had to go in the assault boat.
Right.
Then we hit the beach. The ramp goes down, and all of us on our boat run off. And I run off with the flag, and the French opened up out of a pillbox with a machine gun, and the bullets were right in the sand right in front of us, and it hit the kid on my left. I don't know whether it killed him or whether it just wounded him. Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist to tell me that they're shooting at that guy with that flag.
Right.
So I stuck that thing in the ground, and we were pinned down on that beachhead till a tank come in and blew the pillbox out. And then we advanced into the city. It was below Casablanca, a little town called Safi. And I kept the flag. I went to my first sergeant and I said, "Lestrani," I said, "I want to keep that flag." Never realizing the importance of it. And I shoved it in the bottom of my duffel bag, and I carried that all the way through for almost 2.5 years in the bottom of my duffel bag. When the war was nearly over, I sent it home to my parents. When I got home, I took it and put it in a drawer in 1946.
Mm-hmm.
And we got married in 47. And I've had it stashed away until last year. And I took it down and had it matted.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's out to the block plant hung. I'll show you pictures of it. But we travel from Safi to Casablanca and then all the way across the top of Africa over to Bizerti.
How long did it take for the French to stop shooting back once you landed?
One day.
One day, yeah. Because Patton actually wound up getting along with them rather well, and they sort of switched sides.
There was another battle wagon that was outside of Casablanca.
Mm-hmm.
The Vichy French grabbed some of the French Navy.
Yep.
You know that from history, don't you? Well, they captured, the invasion captured that one of their big battle wagons or cruisers
Right.
in the harbor of Casablanca. And it couldn't get out to do battle. And I saw the pictures. In fact, I thought I had pictures of them, where our battle wagon hit the side, broadside, and you could drive a truck through it.
Yep.
You know that,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. I mean, the French Navy that was there did shoot back and did get shot up as a result.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and again, in each of the landing sections, a little bit different things happen, and there was some nastier fighting in some places and others. But for your experience, it was go in, hit the beach long enough for the tank to come and take out the pillbox, and then after that, there's not really opposition in your sector?
No.
Okay.
Well, I take it back. The next morning, we had an air raid just before dawn, and I think it was an old C-47 where they just threw the bombs out the door.
Well, it could be, because the French didn't have much of an air force at all.
No.
There might have been some transport planes around.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Went right over us and boom, 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 you know. They weren't big bombs, you know.
Now, what did Morocco look like to you? What did you see as you were crossing it, in terms of people or towns or buildings or desert or whatever was there?
You mean the city?
Well, just the whole area, because you're traveling across a good chunk of North Africa there.
Well,
What kinds of things did you notice as you were doing that?
Of course, it's the first time I ever saw an Arab. And, I'll tell you an episode about it. We're unloading supplies at the little port of Safi, and I saw an Arab steal a can of, I didn't know what it was, a gallon can of peas is what it was. And I watched him, and pretty soon he disappeared. And I followed him. He went into the latrine. And I waited to give him time to either come out or see what he was going to do with that. And I walked in there, and here he's got the top cut off, and it's a whole gallon of peas, and he's eating them. And I leveled my gun at him and told him to eat the whole thing. I bet he can't look at a pea today, because he didn't know whether I'd shoot him or not. I wouldn't have shot him for that, but he didn't know that.
How could you communicate with him?
You couldn't.
Oh, you just did you motion to him to keep eating, or?
Well, the end of the barrel of the gun told him, conveyed to him what he had to do.
All right.
If some of our men could speak French, we had, I know a kid from Vermont by the name of Rosselli. He could speak fluent French. So we weren't without someone that could, and he was in my platoon. it's amazing how you can communicate.
Right. Did you see much of the French population in North Africa? Because there was a fairly substantial French civilian population. in
No,
these
none
places.
of the French.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, within the city of the Casablanca, and that they have the Arab city called the Medina,
Mm-hmm.
and that's got 4 walls to it. It's like Hong Kong, a city inside of a city.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't there for a tourist tour,
Right. Right.
and so we moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And we convoyed all the way across. We stopped in Casablanca, we stopped in Algiers,
Mm-hmm.
we stopped in Anzio, I remember that. And it took us, I don't know how many days.
Yeah. What were the roads like there? I mean, how easy or hard was it to travel through that area?
As I remember, we had no trouble with the
Okay.
roads, no trouble.
You remember what the weather was like when you were there?
Hot.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Now, since you were you mostly there just as invasion specialists waiting for the next invasion, or were you getting work to do as engineers while you were there?
No. We remember Montgomery was chasing Rommel
Mm-hmm.
up out of the desert.
Right.
And our landing force, the 9th Division, who was infantry, had their own tanks and that. And they engaged Rommel at the Kasserine Pass.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw none of that. We were farther
You were behind
along
that.
we were up along the coastline, working our way to Bizerti in Tunis. But it was good that we came in when we did, because we helped Montgomery
Mm-hmm.
take care of Rommel.
Sure.
Of course, we didn't. Rommel was experienced. Now we weren't, and I think Rommel come out ahead, but he didn't win.
Now, was your unit actually? Did you have work to do in North Africa after the landing, or were you just waiting for everybody else to finish what they were doing?
We would, where we landed, we helped unload supplies,
Right.
because it was a port town.
Mm-hmm.
But when and I don't remember how long we were there, whether we were there a week or 2 weeks. But then when we started convoying over to Bizerti,
Mm-hmm.
the ground was being laid for the next invasion
Right.
of Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't spend much time in Bizerti or Tunis before we were on an LST. And this is the first time we ever saw an LST.
Right.
And we're headed for Licata, Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And for 3 days, we've gotten a storm out there. And for 3 days, I puked.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably lost 10 pounds. But we made the invasion of Licata, Sicily.
Now, what happened there? What did you do as part of that?
Well, we established the beachhead.
Did you take any fire when you were landing?
No,
Okay.
no, they didn't know. See, we were fighting the Italians too,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not fighters. They're lovers. So the resistance wasn't German resistance, and I remember the first time I ever prayed was July 10th, 1943, and here we're trying to get an LST into the harbor of Licata.
Mm-hmm.
See, we're in control of the beach,
Right.
and we're trying to get an LST into unload it inside and not on the beach. And I looked up, and here comes a Messerschmitt plane below radar. The thing's going to wonder what that is. Below radar, probably doing 300 mile an hour, treetop height, and coming right at us. And I thought I was going to die, because all he had to do was press his machine gun button, and we would have been blown away. But he had a torpedo bomb hung under him. Of course, we didn't know that. And he comes sailing in there full speed, and he dropped that torpedo bomb, and he dropped it seconds, just seconds, too quick, and the bomb hit the breakwater, and all hell broke loose. Because up to that point, there hadn't been a shot fired at him. I didn't even have sense enough to fire him. And I'm looking right down at the front of the plane coming at us. I dove into a shell hole right next to the lighthouse. And here's what I said. First time I ever prayed in my life, God, don't let me die. And I didn't even say please. But I'm down in the bottom of that hole, and here he comes right over the top of us, banked to the right of the lighthouse, and the whole armada of the invasion fleet is out in the bay. They made hamburger out of them. I bet there was millions of bullets shot, and I seen him go down.
Yeah. So you said you dropped a torpedo bomb. I mean, it was actually a torpedo that was supposed to go in the water and hit the side of a ship. Yeah.
Hit that LST.
Yeah, but I can't think the Germans ever had much practice using him, so it's maybe not that big a surprise that he missed.
Well, I never saw one before and never saw one after.
Yeah, I mean, the Japanese used them a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We used them on them, but the Germans didn't, do a whole lot of that kind of fighting.
No, they would dive bomb us more. I didn't know it till afterwards, but on the Anzio beachhead, there was 56 or 57 air raids the first 3 days on us. And I can remember laying on the deck of the ship and watching them dive bomb us, and you could see when they let go of the bomb. You didn't know what ship they were aiming at, and just watch her come down and pray that it didn't hit your ship.
Now, after that first scare at Licata, did you have any more trouble, or did that go smoothly after that?
Oh no, it went smoothly. We were in Palermo before you know it. No, there was. See, Montgomery was coming up the east coast from Gala to Messina.
Right.
And of course,
and Patton was going around the other way.
We went to Palermo straight up from Licata to Palermo, and then we started going towards Messina. And then he slapped that soldier for faking battle fatigue, And I always say to this day, that was a set-up job to get him back to England, because he wasn't needed in Sicily anymore. Mark Clark came to Italy and took care of that, but they needed him in England for the Normandy invasion.
Okay. Well, the history version of that is a little bit different. He got apparently very, very close to really being cashiered, but Eisenhower did value him enough to make sure he got something useful to do. But yeah, I mean, the part of the fight against Sicily that needed the dynamic commander, that had already happened by that time.
Well, see, they gave up.
The Italians did.
Italians gave up. And to this day, I don't remember whether we took their weapons away from them or whether we didn't have to escort them. And we'd go like that and say, Palermo.
Okay. So you saw Italian prisoners then as you were going across Sicily?
Yeah.
Okay. What did they look like to you? In terms of how they were dressed, or how old they were, what condition they were in?
You know, I didn't. They were well fed. I mean,
Mhm.
Italians know how to eat. And Sicily was not war and torn
Right,
yet.
right.
You know,
And,
I remember the night before we slept in Palermo.
mhm.
The night before we boarded ship in a lemon orchard, and the ants were so terrible. We couldn't hardly sleep. But next day we boarded ship and went to Salerno.
Mhm.
No, Sicily wasn't that bad. I got about halfway to Messina,
Mhm.
and either Montgomery, I don't know who beat who, but the film Patton,
Mhm.
that George G. Scott, it could not have been portrayed any better, I think,
Mhm.
by as Patton.
Yeah. Did you ever, were you ever at any of those things where he would address large numbers of soldiers? Did you ever hear him speak, or you just remember seeing him from the ship or driving by?
That's the last I saw him.
Mhm.
I know he was up in the Battle of the Bulge, but I never saw him.
Right.
We were indifferent.
Okay. Now, when you were going through Sicily, did you see much of the civilian population there?
This is going to sound a little gruesome. You know, it's in July, hot,
Mm-hmm.
and here comes one of our ducks. You know what them ducks
Amphibious truck, yeah.
are? Amphibious truck. And one of ours from our company come into Licata with a whole load of dead Italian soldiers on. Throw it on like cordwood.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we didn't care. We were all smiles to see all them dead Italians. But they had to come through the city, and I felt, well, I shouldn't say I felt sorry for them. I was kind of immune to feeling sorry for any Italians or Germans at that time. But all the women, they didn't know but one of them on that, and there was a lot of them, was their son, you know, and the crying and the wailing as he came rolling into town. It was a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
I never got a picture of it.
All right. So you're on, again, so on Sicily, sort of kind of like in Morocco, you're basically there to make the landing and get stuff ashore and start it and help unload maybe. But then once that happens, then you don't have a whole lot to do until the next invasion?
That's right.
Okay. Now the next invasion comes pretty quickly because Sicily we
Yes.
land in July and we're landing in Salerno I think in September or something like that.
September 14th.
Yeah, so that comes pretty quickly. Now what was the Salerno landing like?
I didn't get in on the resistance on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
but the Germans knew by intuition or top secret that we were going to make an invasion there.
Right.
And they met us on the beach. But I was, you know, D-Day is not the very first day. D-Day is counted like the first 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only invasion that we didn't make the first day.
Okay.
Was Salerno. I'm kind of glad I missed it.
Yeah. Was there another engineer unit that did go in, or?
I don't know. It might have been our first battalion.
Mm-hmm.
Our ship got hit coming at us. That's why
Mm-hmm.
coming to pick us up at Palermo.
Okay.
That's what we were told. And so that's why we were a day or two late.
Mm-hmm.
But we when we hit the beach, we stayed on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
and and got the supplies in.
Mm-hmm.
There was no more resistance.
Right. Could you see signs on the beach of the battle that had already taken place?
I couldn't.
Okay. So whatever was there was already cleared off.
Yeah. It was so dry and dusty
Mm-hmm.
that I remember we took our bulldozer and pushed the dust off the side. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Just like powder and deep, you know. When you can push dust off with a bulldozer and try to get down to some damp soil, you know. But I remember being on the beachhead and looking up and seeing an LST out getting ready to unload, and
Mm-hmm.
I had a young fella on there that I knew from Spring Lake. He was in the Navy, and we went to Sunday school together, and we knew each other
Mm-hmm.
well. So I got a duck to take me out when I could get off the beach, and we spent the day rejoicing
Mm-hmm.
with each other, and he had his pictures, and we just had a good time.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long did you stay in Salerno?
Not very long.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go after that?
Naples.
Okay, and what did you do there?
Cleaned up the port of Naples.
What condition was it in when you got there?
Oh, the port of, they couldn't get any ships in to unload, any troops or supplies. And so it was our job to blow the sunken ships out of the water, and so that we could get some dockage.
Mm-hmm.
They had two submarine, Italian submarines in there
Mm-hmm.
that were supplying the electricity for the city. I don't know how much of the city they supplied, but
Probably not too much.
No.
About say running their diesel engines or
Yeah.
whatever, so they could provide some power.
I remember seeing them. But we were in Naples, and we bivouacked right down in the city park,
Mm-hmm.
and the weather was perfect, and we could go up into Naples at night. It was kind of a furlough
Mm-hmm.
during the war, but we didn't stay there too long, and they pushed us up on the casino front to build bridges, and you know, they're trying to get to Monte Casino.
Mhm.
But they didn't, we built one bridge is all, and they pulled us back
Mm-hmm.
all the way to Salerno again,
Mm-hmm.
and we organized to make the Anzio beachhead one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was no piece of cake.
Right.
We landed, I think, January 22nd. Oh, I remember Christmas Day up on the casino front. It was rainy and muddy, and we were wet. We didn't even take our shoes off at night,
Mm-hmm.
and our clothes. When we had to sleep in pup tents, and I remember the fellow that I slept with. He was a weapons sergeant, and there's no room in a pup tent, you know. And we had to dig a trench around it to keep the water from running in it.
Right.
Oh, it was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And we slept with our clothes on, and
Could you keep dry when you slept, or was everything wet?
well, everything was wet. Probably not inside the tent if we could keep the water from going, but it rained,
Yep.
and it was mud. And so from shortly after Christmas, they moved us back to Salerno, and
Right.
we prepared to go to Anzio.
Now, as you're preparing for Anzio, again, were they telling you anything about what you were doing, or was it
No.
just prepare for another invasion sort of thing?
Yeah, whoa. The minute we got on the boat, we knew what it was going to be, but we didn't know where.
Okay. So then, describe then, so did you go in on the first day then at Anzio?
Oh, yeah,
All right.
January 22nd.
So basically describe what you did then that day and what happened.
There was no resistance.
Mm-hmm.
We set up the beachhead,
Mm-hmm.
and the mistake was made, and history will tell you, or you may even know this, the mistake was made, we just went in a little ways and stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And waited to see what the Germans were going to do, and boy, they came at us.
How long after you landed did you start to come under attack?
First night,
First night. And what kinds of things were they throwing at you?
88s.
Mm-hmm.
There's a picture of where they hit our crane the first
Mhm.
night, and it's only 100 feet off the water's edge,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sleeping around that crane because we just landed that day.
Right.
And they, of course, when they hit that crane with an 88, everything started burning, the gas
Right.
and the tires.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, we ran out of there towards, well, we couldn't go back.
Mhm.
The Mediterranean was
Yeah.
behind us. So we had to go forward into a wooded area. And basically, we stayed in that wooded area for from January, February, March, April, May, until June, until we got into Rome.
Finally broke out, right. So what were you doing all that time? Were you unloading supplies and things? Did you have work to do? Were you building fortifications?
That's a good question. I can remember helping load wounded on
Mm-hmm.
down in the town of Anzio. We landed at Natuna,
Mm-hmm.
which is east of Anzio, and we would go to work in Anzio, repairing roads and bomb shell holes, you
Mhm.
know. We would mix up tar and gravel, and because and the British had their section
Mm-hmm.
just north of us, and the Americans had the whole southern section of Anzio and Natuna.
Now, while you were there, to what extent were you under fire or under attack, or what kind, or how much at the
We
time?
never knew when the picture in that of that long gun,
Mm-hmm.
we could hear them. Rome was 25 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
We could hear Rome. You know, it was an open city, and they weren't supposed to use
Mm-hmm.
defensive tactics. But they would, them railroad guns, they would run out of a tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
run the barrel in the air, and
Right.
that's why we called it Anzio Annie.
Mm-hmm.
And we could hear it let go. Not all the time, but boy, they flattened Anzio with that, along with all the air raids.
Right.
You know, Hitler was pretty strong then yet, his army.
Now, what you said you mentioned, I think, you were watching the air raids from the ground. You could be on the ships or on the docks, or
Yeah.
look up and see the stuff go back and forth. Now, were there Allied aircraft that would come and try to shoot them down, or were the Germans just coming over unopposed?
We had an airport there that we made out of those steel slats,
Mm-hmm.
but it was for fighter planes
Right.
only.
Right.
And Spitfires used to land there, and P-51s,
Mm-hmm.
if they were in trouble.
Right.
And we built that, and we had to. I remember the first sergeant called me in one day, and he says, "Vander Wall, you take a detail of men, and here's a map." And I had to go out towards the front with a map, and here's the minefield. Clear it.
Okay.
So I took half a squad of men, and I found the minefield, and we get out and get the mine detectors out, and are ready. You got to find the first one, because then we knew how the Germans laid their patterns.
Right.
And in comes an 88. There weren't supposed to be any German tanks where we were. And but it was short. That was a good thing about it. And everybody's looking at me because I'm the sergeant. And before I could make a decision what to do, another one come in, and it was short also. That told me one thing. That's as far as he could shoot it, because the Germans were good with artillery.
Right.
The first one they'd fire over you, the second one was always under, the third one was in your back pocket. So we jumped in that truck. We got out of there. But I can see that old sergeant, that German sergeant in that tank with his binoculars watching us go down the road making a cloud of dust. But you know, you can get killed that quick.
Yeah. What could you, identify the type of tank?
No.
All right.
Never saw it. You know, it could have been 5 miles away.
So you were just envisioning, like you mentioned seeing it, or were you just imagining him looking at you and
Yes.
taking a shot at you? Yeah. Well, of course, it could very well have been, other type of artillery or just a code gun.
It could have been.
Because they had fewer vehicles, probably more just regular guns. But regardless, you're coming under fire from someplace.
They, that 88 was a marvelous gun.
Yep, and they used it for all sorts of different things. And
That 75 we had on the Sherman tank was
being at Anzio, and so you're spending the better part of 2 months there or whatever, under fire periodically from the Germans. Was there any time while you were there that you began to worry that maybe the Germans would overrun the whole place and come in and get you?
The German general threatened that, but we swallowed that like a grain of salt. You know, he ain't gonna do it. Yeah, it just ain't gonna happen.
Now, could you tell if you were getting things like air support or naval support or things like that? Do you have your planes flying over, or?
If there was, it was more on the front line of where the Germans and the Americans were fighting.
Right.
You know, we're back at the seashore, and the front could be 10, 15 miles in. And you couldn't always, I didn't see too much air support that I can remember. I remember the German air raids.
Right.
Because they would drop flares at night and bomb us at night. They'd light up the whole beachhead with great big magnesium burning parachute flares.
Did they do most of the air attacks at night? Was that easier? It was probably safer for them. They wouldn't get shot down as easily.
Oh man, when they come over, there was firepower on the Anzio beachhead that they had to deal with. It's amazing. The sky would be just red with tracer bullets, and between every tracer bullet is armor plate and a conventional 50 caliber or
Right.
20 caliber, and the sky would just be, and you know the danger part about it, what goes up,
It comes
has to
down.
come
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Man, we could hear it drop. We had dugouts in the woods, so you didn't go out looking for daisies
Right.
at night during an air raid.
All right. So you're there for a better part of 2 months. Now, were you
No,
well?
5 months.
Yeah, that's right. 5 months. That's right. And now, were you well supplied there? I mean, did you have food and everything?
Yeah. Near the tail end of the war, we even near the tail end, we even got steaks one time, and they sent in beer, trying to boost the morale. You know,
Right.
and when you're on a 5 square mile stretch of land for 5 months. You wonder if you're ever going to get to Rome. And the sad part about it is we could have been to Rome the first day.
Yeah. And the part of the problem seems to have been that there just weren't enough Americans or Allied forces in that landing to do everything to take advantage of getting behind there, because we'd already shipped so much up for the D-Day landings in Normandy.
Yeah.
So they didn't have enough reserves to make this work real well, and they weren't very daring with what they had.
And if we tried to get to Rome, they could have pushed us back. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It was not the best conceived
No.
thing, but they were trying to find a way to break the stalemate at Cassino, and they tried it, and
Yeah.
so you got to be a tourist for quite some time in that particular piece of Italy. All right.
It was a smart move, but there was mistakes. What was it? The Gustav line?
They had several of them. That was one of them. Yeah, and so once they finally break out of Cassino, then you can move out, and everybody. Then you get.
Yeah.
Now, did you then follow the army into Rome? So did you go there, or did they just
Yes.
look?
We went there, and of course it's an open city, and the Germans have fled north. And we spent a day or two touring Rome and doing what soldiers do. And then we started to track them north. And we got as far as Leghorn, and they pulled us all the way back to Salerno again. And we got ready for the invasion of southern France,
Right.
which I think was September 14th.
I think it was in August, I think. But
We were in Rome in June, July, August. It was, I think it was August 14th.
yeah,
So
that sounds about right.
we did a little preparation. Don't ask me what we did. Because I don't remember what we did to prepare. We knew what we were doing by now, you know. And we got on an LCI then. And the weather was perfect. And I remember going up between Corsica and Sardinia. And it was just like being on a cruise ship.
Right.
Except the food. But that was, and we landed at St. Raphael.
Okay.
There was some resistance there by the German Air Force because they bombed one of our LSTs and it was burning up right on the beach.
Were there German ground troops there?
Pardon?
Were there German ground troops there?
What?
Were there German ground troops there? Were there German
Oh,
infantry?
yes.
Okay.
Because after about 3 or 4 days, I got a chance to shave. Nice autumn day. And I'm shaving on top. I'm on top of the railroad tracks. And I heard somebody yelling. And I paid no attention to it. They kept yelling and kept yelling.
Mm-hmm.
I turned around and looked. Here's 2 Germans wanting to give up.
Mm-hmm.
Half a block away or less. Less.
Mm-hmm.
So I just grabbed my rifle and escorted them down to the CP and went back and finished shaving.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you landed, were you kind of the first guys in, or do you follow the infantry in, or what happens there?
We always went in with infantry.
Mm-hmm. So they go in. Now, were there obstacles or mines to clear when you got there?
Yes, there was. They had mines planted in concrete barriers,
Mm-hmm.
and one of our bulldozers was pushing them out of the roadway,
Mm-hmm.
and it exploded. So that's how come we knew they'd embedded it
Mm-hmm.
in that concrete
Now,
barrier.
what kind of barrier was it? Was it what sort of size or shape were these things? If you remember, were they the dragon's teeth, or were they big?
Like a dragon's tooth.
Okay, so there's big old chunks of concrete
Yeah.
sticking up to block it out.
Took a bulldozer to get it out of the way.
And by putting a mine in it, the idea would be knock out the bulldozer that's
Yeah.
trying to move it, and then you're stuck and you can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
Now, was there another way to get rid of those things? Could you blow them up, or did you really need a vehicle?
That's the only one I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So what did you do after you lost the bulldozer?
that wasn't part of my deal because that was Mortar Pool's problem,
Ah, okay.
or the company commander. I think I have a picture of it down in the basement. But
Now, what kind of work were you doing there? I mean, what was your assignment?
I was just a sergeant. I was boss of 20 men.
And what were the 20 men doing?
What I told them to do.
Okay, but is it mine clearing or obstacle blowing or?
Yeah, I had a lieutenant that told me, and
Mm-hmm.
and oh, I don't know what we really did. We were trying to get off the beachhead to go north,
Right,
and we did. We didn't stay long on the beachhead.
right.
We went up to Strasbourg.
Mm-hmm.
That's the route we were taking, along the Rhine River.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans were firing from across the Rhine River
Right.
at us on the left side of the Rhine River. But you know, they should have given up a long time before they did.
Now, in order to get up to Strasbourg, you've got to get all the way up the Rhone Valley, and then you've got a long chunk of France to cover. Now, were you just following the infantry up at that point? Did you have other engineering work to do?
We had other engineering. We reinforced the Maginot Line,
Mm-hmm.
anticipating having to retreat.
Mm-hmm.
We worked out on that Maginot Line, laying mines and barbed wire in the snow
Mm-hmm.
before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved into a town called Wingen, and we had to retreat out of there back to a town called Boost, which we were in twice.
Mm-hmm.
Wingen was north of Boost, and we went from Boost. This is in Alsace-Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
Wingen was north of it, but when we got there, there was a lot of German resistance, so we had to retreat to the same town we just came from.
Right. Now, was this going on before or after the Germans attacked in the Bulge?
Before.
Okay. So it's already snowing and cold, even say early December or...
Yeah. Yeah, in fact of the matter is we moved into the homes of the people that lived in Alsace-Lorraine. They were mostly German. You know the history of Alsace-Lorraine. The French and Germans fought over that for years. And the first time we moved, my weapons sergeant and I moved in, we took a feather tick bed in a room that I'm sure their son slept in. And they gave us the cold shoulder, but they couldn't do nothing about it, you know. And that was the first night that we really were warm. Sleep in a feather tick bed, man alive, things are getting good here. And but that didn't last long. I remember getting a fruit cake for Christmas, and it looked like a tank run over it, dried out, but I took it in their kitchen and shared it with them, and that kind of broke the ice. So we moved out, and we went to Wingen and had to retreat, and we come back to Boost, but we didn't go to the same house. We went across the street to another house, 3 or 4 of us guys. And that woman was all alone, but she was a nice German woman that had sugar for our coffee when we didn't have it. Of course, we gave her our garbage that we were sick of eating, meat and vegetable stew and K rations, but she was good to us. And after the war, I remembered her address. Very simple. And Loie and I just got married this 1947, and I packed up a small box of Jell-O and stuff, tapioca pudding and things like that, and chocolate chips, and sent it to her. And she, we didn't have any children yet. She sent back a baby suit. She knitted it, and a bed jacket for my wife. But you know, when we would right back together, right back and forth, I'd have to take it to a German translator, and she had to take it to somebody who could read English. But when she died, I don't know. We went back there in that town about 15 years ago. We went to, we know a German missionary that stayed in Germany for years to try to teach the Germans some religion. And they called us up one day and said, Bill, why don't you and Lloyd come on over and we'll go into Czechoslovakia and Poland. We're going to go on a vacation for a week or 2. So we went. He said, when you come back, when we come back into Germany, I'll take you wherever you want to go. I said, okay, I want to go to Boost and Wingen. And he took us both there. And I went up into the same room I slept in during the war. And I found out more about why we had to retreat out of Wingen while I was there the second time than I did the first time. Because one of the owners of a shop showed me where the German tanks were down by the railroad trestle. And so we had a good time going back into...
Now, so were you there when the Germans attacked in the Bulge? Were you in that area and then you moved out of it, or
No.
what happened?
We were moving towards the Bulge.
Okay.
And you know, all it is a big forest.
Right.
And Christmas Eve day, we moved up. And we were going to sleep in some old German army barracks. And before the afternoon's over, we didn't know anything about the Battle of the Bulge. I didn't. And I'm a platoon sergeant now. I got 60 men. And about dusk that first sergeant come to me, he said, Vander Wall, you've got 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, get your platoon loaded up, we're moving out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know which way we were moving. Intelligence didn't tell me nothing, just do what you're told.
Right.
So I get our old platoon on. We had a half track, a 57 millimeter machine guns, and a squad truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start convoying, and it's dark, and all you see is them two little lights ahead of you at night. And we're going at a snail's pace, you know, at night. And all at once, on the left bank, on the driver's side, I'm in the cab because I'm the sergeant.
Right.
Artillery piece went off, and it was our artillery, one of the big 155s, and all the flames just lit up the whole sky. You could see the silhouette of the gun, but the barrel was pointing the other way. That told me we were in retreat. And I don't remember how far we moved back, but we come to a crossroad, and the lieutenant, my lieutenant says, Van has set up the half track here, and your gun and protect this crossroad.
Now, when you were talking about your equipment, you had said 57 millimeter, but you'd also mentioned machine gun. And did you have a 50 caliber machine gun? Or,
50.
Okay, 50 caliber machine, yeah. As opposed to 57 millimeter, which would be an anti-tank gun. But you didn't have one of those.
Yeah, we had one of them.
You had an anti-tank gun too.
Yeah, but just tickle them German tanks.
Well, yeah, you had to be awfully lucky with a 57 millimeter to do much. Yeah.
I'd bounce right off of them. And anyway, so I set up and I had the sergeant, weapons sergeant who was in control. I told him what to do. And my orders then was to go on the main road and start getting the roads to blow. So the German tanks couldn't get through.
Right.
And in those days, first time I ever saw one, they were about 8-10 inches in diameter, and they called it a beehive. And it was on 3 sticks, steel rods about 8 inches high, and you set it on top of in the middle of the road, and it had a warhead on the bottom of it, off the ground, and it was full of explosive, and we would wire the thing up and jump down the ditch and give her a crank, and it would go, and that old warhead would go down into that blacktop or dirt or frozen ground far enough so that we could pack it with TNT or whatever we were going to blow the road with. And we did that all night. And not knowing whether the Germans were to our right or left or behind us, we didn't know. We didn't know the Battle of Bulge was going on. And we are froze. I mean, I can't emphasize how cold we were. And how long a night that was, because it was so cold.
Yep.
And way out in the middle of the forest, you know, we didn't know where east was or west was. We didn't know where the front was. And daylight come. Hallelujah. And we're marching down the road and found an old chicken coop or a rabbit hutch type of thing. Anyway, we struck a match to it, and we got thawed out. And that's the last thing I remember about that day. I don't remember them coming to pick us up. I often said Because I got a good memory. I often said that my brain must have been froze that night, so I don't know when they come to pick us up. But they did.
Now, did you go back to your older positions, or were you going elsewhere now?
Well, then we went back into, after the Battle of the Bulge was over, we went back into France at a Lake Piora or something like that, and started training for the Rhine River. And with the 85th Pontoon outfit, they carried them up there and we put the bridge together. And in April, see, this is Christmas time.
Yep.
We didn't start to build, we didn't get up to the Rhine River till April.
I think you got late March is I think what the date you got on your pictures. So like March 26th or something like that.
Maybe. But we trained on this lake to put that bridge together. And you know, the Rhine River at Worms is where we did it. It was quite long. And quite a current in the spring of the year. But I'm right out in the middle of that Rhine River for over 9 hours. It took us, I think, 9.5 hours to build it with a whole squad of men. And when that picture of them German soldiers, here they come walking across, giving up. We don't have a tank across yet.
All right. Now, so were you building this in an area where you didn't really have control of the opposite bank yet? Were there American soldiers already ahead of you on the German side?
Not that I know of. No, we had to get across the Rhine.
And was
now
that
maybe at Remagen?
Remagen was they were across from Remagen by then. I guess. But were you being shot at while you were trying to build the bridge, or were you unopposed there?
We were very. That was the fear. Here I am, over there 2.5 years, more than 2.5 years, and was afraid we'd get strafed or artillery come in.
Right.
And you can't dig a foxhole in water.
Nope.
But we had smooth sailing.
And now, once you had built your bridge there, was that pretty much the last thing your unit did at that point?
Yes. We crossed the Rhine River and went towards Heidelberg. And you know, I don't remember what we did at Heidelberg or whether we stayed there long enough. But then we moved from Heidelberg to Landsberg. And there was a labor concentration camp in Landsberg that we went into. And it was building an underground aircraft factory, a big one. Cement was, you know, bomb-proof, you know. And they were using these Jews and Czechs and Poles. And we walked into the camp, and here's dead Jews laying right in the street.
Right.
And I got pictures of them. But that's about the last thing we did. Of course, Roosevelt died about the time we got to Heidelberg. And by the time we got to Landsberg, the war was over. So we're just fussing around. We wound up in Mannheim helping build a fixed bridge across the Rhine when I come home.
And so when did you get to go home?
You know, I don't know.
It was kind of still not very long after the war was over, still in the summer, or?
Well, we started adding up points. You know, you had to have 85 points or something. And if you didn't have that many points, you couldn't go home quick. But I had all kinds of points.
Yeah, the 5 invasions thing probably added up pretty well.
Plus the length of time I was over there. And I got points for the Soldier's Medal I got in Italy. And But I had plenty of points. It was just a matter of time.
Right.
Got on a troop train to head to Marseille to get on a boat. I thought the troop train was never going to get down to Marseille. Marseille is them 40 and 8.
Okay, so you were in those boxcar things, yeah.
Oh gosh. But I was going home.
Mm-hmm.
I would have rode on top of one of them doggone things. Yeah.
Now, what did they send you home on? What kind of ship were you on?
They sent me home on a hospital ship.
Mm-hmm.
And, let me see. I don't know what month, how long it was after the war. I got home on my birthday, which is about now. Tomorrow's my birthday. And that's the first time I got home. That was 1946. No, 45.
45, yeah.
And I left in 1942.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do once you got home?
Well, when we come to New York Harbor, saw that old Statue of Liberty. Liberty. I don't think there was a dry eye on the ship. And they gave me a 3-minute phone call to call my parents. I hadn't talked to them in over 3 years.
Right.
You know. And I got my folks on one end, and they started crying on one end, and I started crying on the other end, and our 3 minutes was up. The operator says, "Sir, your 3 minutes is up." Well, my dad contained himself and said, "Charge it to this end." But oh, what a day. You know, you'd have to experience. You can't really explain what family, because I had good mother and father, and I hadn't seen, and I got 3 brothers and, excuse me, 1 brother and 3 sisters. I hadn't seen them, you know, in over 3 years. So it's a day of rejoicing.
And then did they get you discharged pretty quickly, or how did that work?
Yeah, I went to Camp Sheridan, Illinois, and they discharged me out of there. And then my brother and I went into the cement block business in 1949, and that's been my life, raising 5 children and making cement blocks.
And the firm is still up and running today?
Oh yes, better today than ever before. Because you can buy the automation now to do what you used to have to do with a shovel, you know.
And it still doesn't pay to import cement blocks from China?
Oh no, no,
So,
that'll never happen.
okay. To look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you?
That's a good question. I can answer that. Because I've answered that or told people what it did for me. It developed in me leadership ability. It was forced upon me when I became a corporal, and then a sergeant, and then a platoon sergeant. So I never had trouble handling men. And I had a Dutch temper and a right fist that if anybody gave me any back talk or a hard time, they knew what they could expect.
Well, did you have occasion to use the right fist when you were in the Army?
Yes, I did. Yes. And do you know what it was? It was after the war over chewing tobacco. I was, just before I came home, they made me a supply sergeant. And because I was in supply before the war, so I had that on my record, and the supply sergeant made first sergeant, and so they made me supply sergeant. And the cook, I'll tell you his name, Bailey, come into my tent and he says, Van, he says, you're not being fair with that plug tobacco. I said, what do you mean? Well, he says, other guys got more than I'm getting. And we got into an argument. And I'm on an army cot, or on one side of the army cot. He's on the other. And in reality, he's telling me I'm cheating or lying. Boom! Yeah, I still remember his name. But, you know, I had good men.
Were you with essentially the same group of guys all the way through?
Yeah, some of them got wounded and killed. There's a kid buried in Muskegon Cemetery that got wounded on the Anzio beachhead, and he needed, it killed the medic that was with him, but he got wounded. He was my age. Muskegon's close. He's probably the closest one that lived by me, and he got wounded that afternoon. The shell come right over the top of us from Rome, the big one.
Right.
And they passed the word around they needed blood, type O. I says, I got O, so I went in the tent. You know, that's about all they had was for a hospital tent.
Right.
And we talked just like you and I are talking, but he's under morphine. I don't know where he's wounded. And I lay down on a cot alongside him, and the doctor or whoever
Medic
did it
or whoever, yeah.
took the blood out of this arm and pumped it right into his arm. And that night he died. And I heard later that he got wounded in his privates. And you know, you can't stop the bleeding down there. When his body was shipped from Anzio to Muskegon, I was the pallbearer for him. When I got home, I went and looked up his mother. His dad was dead. And brothers and sisters. And that's the last I saw him when we put him in
Right.
the cemetery. But that's the only time I ever had to do that. Glad to do it.
But you've had a lot of the same men that you worked with then for a long period of time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we weren't infantry, you know. We were in the battle zones, and guys got killed. But in other platoons, let me see, I've got to think of the guys in our platoons that got killed. And I can't think of them. But we had men get killed and wounded.
Although the most dangerous landing in a way was the one that you didn't have to go into on the first day.
Yeah.
So you missed Salerno, and that was probably fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you went through a whole lot. You came out of it very well. And you tell a good story about it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wrote that book, is so that that booklet, it's not a book. So my grandchildren and great-grandchildren who won't know anything about Grandpa. I've got a lot of grandchildren that know me, you know. But, and I made a copy for each one of them so that we got 14 of them, and 2 great-grandchildren.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
No problem.
All right. That.